Breaking news for Little People Big World fans. Today I share surprising update. Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler parted ways, and Caryn Chandler ultimately married her new concealed partner. I will provide a comprehensive explanation. Matt and Caryn devised a life together that included an ideal home, a golden era of retirement characterized by grandchildren and sunsets over the farm. However, the durability of a vow is contingent upon the strength of its foundation. The foundation was collapsing long before any of us were aware, as we discovered from numerous sources close to the family. The expressions intended for the camera concealed a world of private suffering, broken promises, and a fundamental disagreement that would ultimately separate them. Greetings and thank you for visiting Unfiltered Reality. Today we are presenting a narrative that will drastically alter your preconceived notions of the Roloff family. We have been conducting an investigation into this narrative for several months, gathering information from confidential sources who have up until this point maintained their silence. Their separation was not recent. Months ago, it transpired silently and without fanfare. The very thing that brought them together, Roloff Farms, is the reason for their split. We are able to confirm that Caryn Chandler has covertly married a man who is not a part of the Little People Big World universe, despite the fact that Matt Roloff has been maintaining a brave facade for the world. For the next 2 hours, we will guide you through the concealed reality of their relationship. The final explosive argument that ended it all, the identity of Caryn's new spouse, the details of their secret wedding, and the timeline of their secret breakup will be disclosed. We will also investigate the implications of this for Matt Roloff, his children, and the future of the show that made them renowned. This is the narrative of a fantasy that was ultimately shattered and a secret that was never intended to be disclosed. From its inception, the relationship between Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler was enveloped in rumors and controversy. Roloff Farms had employed Caryn for a decade, for which she had served as its manager. Caryn was promptly identified as Matt's new companion following the public dissolution of his marriage to Amy. According to Amy Roloff, Caryn has been an integral component of pumpkin season, and I have known her for an extended period of time. It is painful to contemplate their union. Amy's distress served as the primary motif for an extended period. Fans were divided. Was Caryn a devoted employee who developed feelings for her supervisor subsequent to his divorce, or was she a contributing factor to its demise? Matt and Caryn have consistently maintained that their affair began after their separation. However, the perception of an overlap would cast a shadow over their relationship for years. This shadow is crucial because, according to a source who was employed at the farm during that transitional period, Caryn was perpetually engaged in an insurmountable battle to gain acceptance, not only from the admirers, but also from within the family. To the children, she was consistently referred to as Caryn the employee in the outset. That took an extended period of time to alter, and for certain individuals it may never have been entirely resolved. She was Matt's fiancée, but she was never going to be mom, and she was aware that she would never ever replace Amy in that familial structure. A recurring motif would be the sensation of being an outsider. Caryn developed a cordial relationship with the grandchildren and found an ally in Matt. However, the tension, particularly with Zach and Tonny, was palpable, and that tension would erupt over the most critical asset in the Roloff empire, the north side of the farm. Zach Roloff, I was hopeful that we could reach a point where we could, strike a deal and I could purchase the farm. Matt Roloff asserts, "My objective is to empower the children to assume responsibility. However, it is an enterprise and we must exercise caution." The negotiations between Matt and his sons, Jeremy and Zach, became a pivotal moment. The consequences were evident to us as observers. Zach and Tonny perceived the asking price as unjust and an affront to their legacy. Matt believed that his sons were failing to recognize the business realities of the situation. However, the extent of Caryn's involvement in this matter was not entirely apparent. We conversed with a source who is extremely close to the family and has requested anonymity in order to safeguard their relationships. They characterized Caryn's stance during these negotiations as unattainable. Caryn was trapped in the midst. She was Matt's companion on the one hand. She was obligated to provide him with the necessary support for his business decisions, as he was in the conviction that he was making a reasonable offer, despite his strong-willed nature. On the other hand, she could observe the emotional distress it was inflicting. She could observe Zach's retreat and the distress Tori was experiencing. She attempted to serve as a mediator in the background. However, the lads perceived her as a member of Matt's team. They believed that she was speaking in his ear, attempting to influence him. Caryn herself articulated this challenging situation during the program. Caryn Chandler asserts, "I am merely endeavoring to provide Matt with assistance. It is a challenging circumstance. I am aware that the children are disappointed, and it is disheartening. However, this is Matt's profession, and he is obligated to act in accordance with his convictions." Our source has informed us that this conflict had a significantly greater impact on her relationship with Matt than we had known. It was not solely about the children, it was also about her own future. She observed how Matt's intransigence, which resulted in his inability to reach a compromise, had the potential to alienate those he held in the highest regard. And a dreadful notion began to cross her mind. What would be the outcome if she and Matt ever had a significant disagreement? If he could do this to his own son? Was her position in his life as secure as she had imagined? This was the initial significant fissure in the foundation. The farm, which was intended to serve as the foundation of their future, had become a source of significant family conflict. Caryn was compelled to select a stance which resulted in her isolation. The ideal of a large, joyful, integrated family that shared the farm was fading, and with it, a portion of her dream with Matt. Matt redirected his attention after the children's intentions to acquire the farm were discarded. It was his new aspiration to construct a luxurious custom residence for himself and Caryn on the property. The arrangements were observed. We observed the enthusiasm. It was intended to serve as their permanent residence. Matt Roloff declares, "This is it, honey. The master suite will be situated to the right, while the living room will be situated to the left. It is going to be extraordinary." However, the ideal residence remained merely a dream as the seasons progressed. Construction was perpetually postponed. At first, there were complications with the permits. Then supply chain complications arise. Then Matt's own indecisiveness. He would alter the plans, reconsider the configuration, and become preoccupied with a dozen other minor projects on the farm. There was more to the constant delays for Caryn than merely a logistical frustration. Their relationship was symbolized by them. Susan, a close acquaintance of Caryn, consented to engage in conversation with us. She depicted a woman who was becoming increasingly fatigued. Caryn is a person who takes action. She is pragmatic. When she makes a decision, she makes an effort to see it through. Matt is an idealist. He is fond of the project's concept, the schematics, the planning. However, what about the actual execution? He becomes diverted. She had heard about this ideal residence for years, but all she could see was an empty plot of land. It began to feel as though she was being presented with a lure that she would never be able to grasp. The show began to reflect this frustration, provided that one was aware of its presence. There was one conversation in particular that now appears to be a striking example of foreshadowing. Matt and Caryn were engaged in conversation regarding the antique farmstead, which Amy had inhabited for an extended period of time. Matt Roloff, "I was wondering if we could temporarily reside in the larger residence." Caryn Chandler, Nubber, "I have previously informed you that I would never feel at ease in that residence. Amy's residence was situated there. That was her existence. I would not be at ease in that location. We must have our own space containing our own recollections." That statement was everything. We require our own space. It was not solely about the construction of 4 walls and a roof. It was a matter of legitimacy. It was about establishing an existence that was not based on the specter of Matt's past. The farmstead symbolized the experience of living in Amy's shadow. The ideal home was never constructed, despite the fact that it represented a genuine, equal partnership. Susan stated that this became a significant point of contention. They engaged in an ongoing argument about it in private. Caryn, in the past year, would inquire, "Matt, when are we going to do this? My entire existence is suspended. and Matt would become defensive. He would compile a list of all the other projects he was currently working on, including the rental property, the new barn, and pumpkin season. All of it was a component of the same overarching vision to him. She perceived that she was his least important concern. The impasse was psychological. In Matt's opinion, commencing construction on the final house may have entailed the complete elimination of alternative scenarios, such as one of the children altering their mind and purchasing the farm. The final chapter, The Ideal Home, signified the conclusion of the line. Also, it is possible that he was not adequately prepared to compose it. A lack of a home for Caryn signified a lack of commitment, a lack of a tangible future. She had relocated from her personal residence to a lesser residence in Portland, and she subsequently devoted a significant amount of time to their shared residence in Arizona. However, her existence in Oregon was spent in his domain, in his universe, and surrounded by his history. That was intended to be rectified by the ideal home. Our sources indicate that Caryn began to emotionally withdraw when it became apparent that the event was a delusion. The house itself was not the source of the nightmare. Rather, it was the realization that the future she had been promised might never come to fruition. Our sources indicate that the relationship was on life support by early 2024. They continued to film Little People, Big World, and continued to share photos of themselves beaming on social media. However, the connection was deteriorating behind closed doors. The farm and the future remained the paramount concern. We were able to communicate with an additional former employee who collaborated closely with Matt and Caryn during the pumpkin season of the previous year. Their description of the ambiance between the two is unsettling. We are informed that the late summer of 2024 was the turning point. It was not a single dramatic event, but rather a death by 1,000 wounds that culminated in a final silent conversation. The final conversation was described by our source Susan, who is a friend of Caryn. It transpired in Arizona, away from the farm's inquisitive eyes. Caryn placed her cards on the table. Caryn informs Matt, "I am unable to continue with this. We have been discussing a future for years, yet we are no closer to it than we were when we began. The residence is not being constructed. The family is irreparably fractured. I am currently in a state of purgatory, anticipating an existence that will never materialize." Matt inquires, "What are you discussing?" "We enjoy a wonderful existence. We have Arizona. The estate is ours. These tasks necessitate time. I am currently in the process of addressing them." Caryn responds, "No, Matt. The estate is yours. You have your own initiatives. I am a visitor in your existence. I am fond of you. However, I must have my own existence, rather than merely participating in yours. I am not interested in contributing to the discord within your family. I am not interested in wasting the remainder of my existence waiting for you to determine your desires." Susan stated that this was the conclusion. There was no shrieking or shouting, only a final and devastating realization. They mutually consented to their separation. However, there was a complication: the impending pumpkin season and their contracts with the television network. They agreed to maintain a unified front for the show and the public until their obligations were met. It was a business decision that was intended to safeguard the Roloff brand and avert a media frenzy. So, while we were viewing these images and assuming that the fairy tale was still intact, Caryn Chandler was discreetly packing her belongings. She spent a decreasing amount of time in Oregon. She either traveled alone or with her own companions during her excursions to Arizona. Matt's explanation for her absence from the farm was that she was taking a break to enjoy her retirement, a convenient half-truth that obscured the agonizing reality that they were living distinct lives. Matt was in Oregon, absorbed in his agricultural endeavors, possibly as a coping mechanism for his loneliness. Additionally, what about Caryn? Caryn was re-establishing a connection with a world that she had abandoned decades ago, a world that existed prior to Roloff Farms, a world in which she was not referred to as Caryn from Little People, Big World, but rather as Caryn. In that universe, she encountered an individual who was either new or old. Mark Harrington is the name that alters everything in this narrative, as every secret has a name. Our inquiry has directed us to an individual who is the complete opposite of Matt Roloff in every conceivable respect. He is not recognized as a public figure. He is not interested in reality television or fame. He is a successful, discreet, and dependable individual who has known Caryn for decades. According to our sources, Mark Harrington and Caryn Chandler were raised in the same social circles in Washington state. In their adolescence, they were friends. However, they lost touch as their paths diverged. Mark established a prosperous career in real estate by developing commercial properties in Spokane. Coincidentally, he spent his winters in Scottsdale, Arizona, the same city where Matt and Caryn owned their vacation home. Susan, Caryn's confidant, stated that the reunion was entirely accidental. Caryn was spending an increasing amount of time alone in Arizona following her separation from Matt. One morning, she was at a nearby coffee establishment when she heard someone call her name. Mark was the individual in question. During the winter, he resided there. They had not encountered each other in more than 3 decades. It was a complete surprise. They conversed for hours, discussing their lives, their children, and their divorces. This fortuitous encounter rapidly developed into a profound bond. Mark epitomized all that Caryn was currently lacking in her life. Matt's existence was characterized by perpetual undertakings, intricate family dynamics, and public scrutiny. Their relationship was characterized by the farm. The cameras were consistently operational. Mark's environment was straightforward and consistent. He was already financially secure and prosperous. He was not constructing a reverie, rather he was enacting it. He provided her with an opportunity that Matt was unable to provide: anonymity and tranquility. Susan informs us that Caryn was initially hesitant. The wounds from her separation from Matt were still raw. However, Mark maintained his composure. He was not attempting to emulate Matt Roloff. He was not interested in the farm or the exhibition. He harbored feelings for her. He merely desired to bring her joy. He took her to restaurants that were not particularly popular, where she would not be recognized by anyone. Hikes were undertaken by them. They conversed for hours without a camera crew waiting outside. He perceived her as an individual rather than as a character in a television program. Caryn experienced a sensation of being able to simply breathe for the first time in years. She was ecstatic. It was akin to witnessing an adolescent fall in love. Caryn maintained the confidentiality of the relationship. There were only a few of her most trusted acquaintances who were aware. She was averse to the media spectacle that would undoubtedly ensue. She was compelled to safeguard this new, fragile contentment from the tumult of the Roloff universe. She was, in fact, constructing a new life, a new future with a new man, completely in secrecy, while the world believed she was merely taking a step back from the farm. A covert relationship can only remain confidential for a limited amount of time before it necessitates the validation of a commitment. The decisiveness of her new companion must have been a potent elixir for Caryn Chandler, who had been waiting years for a tangible commitment from Matt Roloff. Mark Harrington proposed to Caryn in the early spring of 2025, following a brief but intense romance that lasted only a few months. There was no elaborate gesture, and no television crew was present to capture the moment. Susan, our source, reported that he proposed to Caryn during a tranquil sunset at their shared residence in Arizona. Caryn responded by saying yes immediately. There was no hesitation. I was informed by her, "Why delay?" She had been anticipating her arrival for nearly a decade. Mark was certain. She was certain. He desired to be her spouse. He desired to provide her with the security and tranquility she desired. It was everything that Matt had been unable to accomplish. They selected a wedding that would be indicative of their relationship: private, intimate, and significant. They desired an elopement rather than a grand affair. They selected a location that was distinctly Pacific Northwest but was located far from the drama of Roloff Farms, Cannon Beach, Oregon. Caryn Chandler and Mark Stephen Harrington were legally married in a ceremony conducted in Clatsop County, Oregon on April 28, 2025, as public records confirm. We have obtained a copy of the public marriage license. It is genuine. It is now official. We have been informed that the ceremony was strikingly straightforward. It transpired in a remote area of the shoreline in the late afternoon as the sun began to sink behind Haystack Rock. Caryn, Mark, an officiant, and 2 of Caryn's dearest acquaintances served as witnesses. Caryn donned a cream-colored dress that was both elegant and straightforward. Mark donned a linen uniform. There were no cameras, no personnel, and no Roloffs, only the sound of the ocean and the words that united them. We received this photograph anonymously. Although the image is indistinct, it seems to confirm the narrative that our sources have provided. A straightforward ceremony that is a far cry from the life she once knew. Almost no one was aware that Caryn Chandler had transitioned into Karen Harrington. Matt Roloff was left to wander the grounds of his domain alone while Caryn was embarking on a new existence. We are informed that the news of Caryn's marriage struck him like a physical strike. Despite their separation, a source close to Matt maintains that he consistently harbored a glimmer of optimism regarding the possibility of reconciliation. He was convinced that she would return once he had successfully begun construction on his ideal home. He was taken aback by the rapidity of the situation rather than the separation. In one moment, he believes they are on vacation, and in the next, he receives news from a mutual acquaintance that she has become engaged. And what about the wedding? He was unaware that she was in a serious relationship. It rendered him completely incapacitated. The notion that she could move on and get married so quickly caused him to reevaluate every aspect of their nearly 10-year relationship. According to an individual who is in direct contact with Matt Roloff, the subtle indications of a man struggling with significant change are evident when one closely examines Matt's social media accounts in the spring of 2025. The captions are replete with expressions such as new beginnings, moving forward, and life throws you curveballs. With a frenzied intensity, he has been immersed in farm labor. His singular focus has been the new barn, which was previously a secondary project. It is a conventional coping mechanism. When your personal life is in a state of disarray, you exert control over what you can. Additionally, Matt Roloff has the ability to manage his farm. The irony is catastrophic. The farm, the very thing that drove Caryn away, is now his sole source of comfort. The ideal house tract remains unoccupied, serving as a testament to a future that will never materialize. His dominion spans 100 acres. However, the queen has renounced her position as monarch. According to an individual who is acquainted with Matt, he is maintaining a valiant demeanor in order to protect his family and the general public. He is currently in the process of filmmaking. The pumpkin season is still in the planning stages. However, he is profoundly lonely and devastated in private. The impact of a catastrophe of this magnitude is not limited to the two individuals involved. It also sends shockwaves through an entire family. Therefore, how have the Roloff children responded to the information regarding Caryn's departure and clandestine marriage? The reaction is complex and fluctuates from child to child, as one might anticipate. A synopsis was provided by a source who is close to the family. The news was received with a combination of sorrow and vindication by Zach and Tori. They have been estranged from Matt and Caryn for an extended period of time, primarily as a result of the farm dispute. Zach felt as though his suspicions were validated. He consistently believed that Caryn was a significant factor in the farm negotiations. In his opinion, her abrupt departure and hasty marriage demonstrated that her loyalty was never truly to the family, but rather to Matt. However, he is simultaneously filled with sorrow for his father. No son desires to witness their father's injury in that manner. Audrey Roloff is being forthright about her postpartum experience following the delivery of her newborn. Audrey, the face of Little People, Big World, and her husband, Jeremy Roloff, welcomed their third child, Radley Knight, earlier this week. Audrey and Jeremy are also the parents of two children, daughter Ember Jean and son Boded James, who will be 2 years old in January. Audrey contemplated her health in the days that ensued after Radley's arrival on Monday. In an Instagram story post on Friday, she expressed her desire for a distinct postpartum experience after her third delivery. Audrey reminded her followers in a subsequent post that the tribulations she is currently experiencing are a reminder that not everything is as it appears when new mothers post on social media after giving birth. Please be advised that this is a rare occurrence on the other side of the screen, despite the abundance of adorable newborn photos that are shared following the delivery of a new infant. A very tired, hurting, recovering mama with an overflowing postpartum nightstand, she wrote. Tears of delight as she swoons over her newborn baby, and tears of agony as she aches in too many locations to count. As you endeavor to alleviate one discomfort, you become more cognizant of the others. It is one of the most challenging and humbling seasons of my existence. Audrey continued, I also believe that there is not enough discussion about it. Therefore, I am merely presenting myself to serve as a reminder that if you are unable to leave your bed during the initial weeks and your body is in a state of disarray, you are not alone. I suspect that the number of us is significantly greater than what Instagram suggests.